Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI Interconnect Podcast, where we explore the people, the ideas, and technology shaping the future of AI, data, and digital innovation. I'm your host, Laurent, and in each episode, I sit down with founders, builders, and industry leaders to talk about what is really happening behind the scenes, what's working, what's challenging, and what's the next few years might look like. Today, I'm joined by Mario Cantin, CEO and Chief Data Strategist at Prodago. And Prodago focuses on helping organizations optimize, and operationalize data governance and AI governance, turning complex regulation and policies into practical workflows team can actually execute. Mario has spent years working at the intersection of data strategy, governance, and enterprise transformation. Today, we will talk about the real challenges organizations face with AI governance, why compliance is often misunderstood, and how companies can move from theory to real operational governance. Mario, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here.
Hello, Laurent. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. I'm so happy. A friendly conversation, Mario. It is great to have you. And before we jump into Prodago and AI governance, I'd love to start with your story. Can you share a little about your background and what led you into the story in the world of data strategy and governance?
Yes, absolutely. My background, well, academic background is I'm an engineer with MBA and financial background. But throughout all my career, I've been involved with different organizations, often as a consultant, to address different data management challenges. And I've worked on all facet of data management, managing database, managing network, managing uh, 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 data warehouse, building solution, architecture teams, strategic, master data management. So I've been involved with all facets of data management throughout all my career. And I would say the main thread of this career path is, I would say, the curiosity to understand why things are being done. So by wanting to better understand data management itself, the thread has been to determine what's important. Why are we doing this? So it's been a journey of data management. This obsession trying to connect data management with business strategy led me to governance, which I consider as an alignment mechanism between data management and business objective. It's a mechanism to make sure things are aligned. So that's my academic background that led me, I would say, 13 years ago now to create Prodago. At this point, 13 years ago, I was managing data governance for National Bank of Canada at this time. And at this time, I was involved and I saw the struggle of organization to, whenever they have business objective, how do you ensure data management follows these business objective? And I saw the challenge to transform and to align, and that led me to Prodago. This challenge of an organization having business objective, creating process, creating technology. I created Prodago because I saw an opportunity and a need for organization to be able to uh, handle or manage the data management as a transformation challenge. So it's been my focus of the past 13 years.
Wonderful. I love it. Okay, perfect. And a lot of organizations today have policies, frameworks, governance documents, but translating those into real action inside teams seems to be the hard part. Why is that gap so so common?
It's a challenge. Our organization. Let's consider this from a business perspective. An organization, they don't exist in order to manage data. They exist in order to achieve business objective. And data management is supposed to support these objectives. One of the main challenges I see is that historically, managing data, and now it applies directly to AI, has always been considered as this is a set of foundational capabilities that needs to exist in the organization. Data management is considered as a structure challenge. The thought is that if you build foundational capabilities, then the organization will be able to use the data to support its objective. It's always been considered like this by many organizations. And even from an architecture perspective, remember, we used to think of data hub, okay, being able to distribute, access data. The challenge with this is that this is not business driven. It's the illusion that if you build the capabilities, then you'll be able to support all types of business requirement. The thing is, building data management foundational structure too vast is very costly. And then you become disconnected and you lose agility to produce data product. That's a big pitfall. So we've learned this in the past. Remember, if you were there, Laurent, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were thinking about the data warehouse, at one point we said, let's build, a place where all the data resides, and then we'll resolve everything because data will be there. No, you'll fail if you do this. What you need to do is look at your business objective, wonder what you need in terms of data, and then you build it align with the requirement of the business for this data. That's the same thing for data management. And organizations struggle to do this. Okay, they think that if you build the foundation, you'll be okay. No, you'll lose the agility to support business objective. So the mindset that's often missing is you need to think of data management as something that must be business driven. So very simple. You look at what the organization intends to do in the next years. You identify the key processes, the key data required to support the processes, and the nature of the data management fundamental to support these objectives. So you start with what you want to do, and then you define data management required to do this, but not as a foundational capability structure. You need to be driven and focused by what the organization wants to do. Organization learned that in the past 2 decades, mainly losing the agility. And now, because organization wants to create AI product and suddenly the world of requirement and technology is changing so fast, suddenly the disconnect become even more important. The disconnect between what an organization wants to do and the capability to support it becomes even more disconnected. So to wrap up this, the idea, this gap you've mentioned is the inability of organization to manage data as something that's business driven. And here, this incapability to do this led to the failure of organization to create an AI product that can be trusted because all the different facets of data management are not in place or are not reactive or agile enough to support the need of AI product.
Okay, then we're hearing a lot, as you say, about AI governance right now. And regulators are talking about it, companies are worried about it, and teams are trying to figure it out. What are some of the biggest misconceptions companies have when they think about governance or compliance?
I'm involved in several groups related to data, AI governance, AI sovereignty, and I have a privileged position to see the nature of the chaos in trying to define the problem. So there are many, I would say there are a couple of foundational problems here. The first one I would say is when you talk about, let's talk about AI governance. when you talk about AI governance and you discuss, you engage with organization and ask for the challenge, then it goes, all over the place. So, but what are the different dimensions that are key to understand AI governance? The first one is you need to understand that AI is not just a concept. The governance of AI can mean different things. The key facet would be governing the use of AI versus governing the development of AI versus governing the purchase or procurement of AI. These are three facets of AI governance that needs to be thought of in as different element of AI governance. And if you don't, then you're not able to structure the discussion about what do we need in the organization. This is again why it start with what the organization wants to do. Many organizations are seeing the use of the Copilot, the use of the ChatGPT, of cloud, the technology by different people in the organization, the growing use of AI technology to create code and used by developer to create systems. So this is about governing the use of AI. So you need, as an organization, to define what's acceptable, type of technology, what type of control, what type of approval you need, what's the process, what type of training focused on usage of AI. That's not the same thing as governing the development of AI. So an organization that wants to develop a chatbot, okay, you're an insurance company, you want to develop a chatbot to automate a claim automation process, and you're developing a chatbot. That's a different governance angle. It requires a different mindset. You need to consider, model development and the different challenge and the source of data and the quality of data used and the training and the threshold and the data drift and all the explainability consideration. It's a different mindset, and it needs to be thought of as a specific focus. We want to develop AI product. What does it mean? Another facet that's rarely addressed in a structured way by organization is that no, we don't want to develop new AI. We want to, use ChatGPT, maybe do some RAG enrichment perspective and have it, customized for. So it's about the procurement process. What are the type of control? What type of contracts? How do we deal with third parties when we procure and buy AI? So the first gap in AI governance is the incapability to consider these big buckets. And if you don't, you're all over the place. Depending on who's sitting at the table, it's unclear what you want to do and what you need to focus on and what should be your priority. If your main concern is usage of AI, there are levers to govern usage of AI. They're not the same at all as the governance lever to govern the development of AI. So that's the first big constraint in being able to address AI governance. And big constraint is when you consider developing AI. Okay, you say, okay, no, we have many initiatives. We're a bank, a financial institution. We have many initiatives where we want to develop AI solution for credit scoring, improving communication with client, etc. So we want to develop a AI product. And you say, oh, so we need to govern AI product. We need responsibilities, we need different tools, we need processes and life cycle and gating and checkpoint, the governance mechanism. But if you try to govern AI as a concept, you're almost bound to fail. Because what we're saying right now is it depends on the type of AI you want to develop. So governing, traditional predictive modeling AI, that's a thing. Governing generative AI, that's something else. Okay, governing the LLM processes versus governing computer vision processes. These are all AI technology. The governance requirement depends on the type of AI that you want. So first you need to determine how you want to interact with AI, or who you want to buy, you want to use, you want to develop. And if you want to develop or buy, what are you talking about? Because you need to position the organization with regard to the type of AI being used. So one of the gap I'm seeing in many organizations, in many countries, it's the same challenges wherever you're talking about, Middle East countries or Canada or Europe, same challenges. You see this type of in trying to govern the concept of AI. And that's because we started to do this 3 years ago, where AI was for many just a concept, the idea of a thing that learns, and that we need to put some controls around this. Now it's moving forward very, very fast. So that last challenge is right now. If you really want to govern AI in a way that's going to put the right guardrails and provide the right trust, you need to consider and be aware of the type of AI. So you look at all of this, and there's one key aspect that's rarely addressed that way, is that all of this needs to be business driven. You need to determine what you need as an organization, what you're doing, what are your priorities, and then focus exactly on the component of AI that requires governance. If you don't do this and you stay at the concept level, you're bound to fail. Your governance policies, your AI governance policies will be conceptual and totally disconnected from real use case situation and not provide the level of trust that's required.
Very, very, very interesting. Okay, then, and do you see a difference between how startup approach governance compared to large enterprises?
That's a good question. I would say startup approach or less mature approach. So what's the difference between a big organization wanting to govern AI and a small organization? Often big organizations are not mature. So you need to consider how do you establish a balance between speed and safety, or speed and safety efficiency. That that's your point, Laurent. Here is probably the most challenging one. If you do this exercise of finding the type of AI use case you want to address, the type of AI technology you need to govern. Okay, let's say you're very precise, and you look at all the governance requirements. There's many of them. The governance requirement touches, data operation within AI. They touches privacy requirement. They touches security requirement. They touch ethics, and they touch, model management. So you need a way to address and understand all the different facets that needs to be governed, and that understanding these facets is very challenging for organization. I was saying you were talking about the small versus a large organization. So it's complex. It means many topics needs to be addressed whenever you want to govern AI. So the challenge is, how do you find a balance that's right for your organization? That's the biggest problem. What I'm doing with organization is through playbooks, analyzing laws and relation. I bring to Prodago's client the clarity. So once you have the clarity, it's like you're switching the light on. Suddenly you see everything that can make your project fail. Okay, and the first reflex would be to switch the light off. Okay, but if you keep the light on, the challenge becomes, what's the right subset of this? Understanding my size, maturity, and risk tolerance. And that becomes the key challenges. Where do I start? Because if suddenly you consider all governance requirements all at once, you're going to kill innovation. You're going to stop everything. So you cannot all at once bring all governance requirement. So the main challenge of organization is finding this balance. So what does it mean? It means you look at what you want to do in terms of AI. You identify the most important risk for which you have the lowest tolerance. If you're a Canadian Department of Defense, your tolerance to certain risk will not be the same as your tolerance for certain risks if you're a health company. Okay, so you identify the key element for which you have a lowest risk tolerance, and you start with these. So how do you do this? How do you first, ensure and recognize your risk tolerance? And how do you use this risk tolerance to determine where do we start? We're a small organization or we're a low maturity organization. How do you identify the subset, the first subset? And you think of it as a crawl, walk, and run. So we need to start somewhere. And if we don't, we're going to stop everything. So that's a challenge. The good news is that there's some best practices about this. Okay, there's an approach on, depending on the type of controls you're considering. What do you want to do first? Do you want to first focus on governance control that will prevent or correct bad things, or do you want to focus on things that will detect problem? Most organizations will start with the detect first. So, okay, I don't know the type of problem that I currently have. So this type of frame pattern, a thought pattern, helps you to understand what do I start with. So in order to determine the first steps, depending on your maturity and size, consider your maturity. Okay, what can you do? You don't have the people to do it, or what resources you have at your disposal, and consider your risk tolerance. So use this as a way to identify the first critical subset of governance requirement, and then you define your journey. And if you do this, the idea is this is an ongoing process. This is not something you do once and then you know where you're going. The idea is the risk tolerance, the type of product will change over time. So the main challenge of organization is not creating an AI governance structure. It's creating a mechanism, an agile mechanism by which you're going to be aligned. You're going to be able to align governance critical identification of critical governance requirement when new products will come. New technology, new AI technology will be there in 1 year. That's for sure. So the question now is, what do you do now to have an agile mechanism to readjust identification of critical governance requirement based on how things will evolve? So agility should be the main factor, not the main focus, not structure.
Okay, so same question. What should leader be thinking about when today, if they want their organization to be ready for the next wave of AI regulation?
That's a great question, Laurent. What I'm seeing, because I have the chance to work with different regulators in different countries, and I'm seeing a shift in the types of regulation that we're seeing. If you consider European regulation around the AI Act, for example, you see that the main focus was to recognize that some AI use cases are high risk and should be considered high risk. And when they're high risk, certain guardrails needs to exist to avoid certain bad things for happening. That's definitely something that should be a priority of the different regulators in the world. You want to make sure that the high risk use cases and that certain type of AI usage should be governed. There's a real preoccupation about this. The other preoccupation is that when you're seeing different governments who seeing AI as an opportunity. So they recognize that AI is now a game changing. So something is happening. Consider not to add more controls. They consider to ensure or enable the use of AI. So if you're thinking about the government of Canada or the government of Saudi Arabia, both of them have in common the perspective of the challenge of how do we enable organization to safely adopt AI. The enablement is a key thing. So both regulatory environment are considering how can we facilitate, how can we help organization to be more ready. So if you consider, for example, that strong and lean and efficient data management capabilities is fundamental. If you want to use Gen AI and your capability to manage metadata and lineage and traceability of LLM supply chain, the capability to follow things, if you don't have this, you'll fail. So then you consider data quality and metadata management as foundational enabler. So you from an organization perspective, you can consider and see compliance and regulation as element of guardrails and things you need to work within, but also consider the different frameworks and standards that will help you to succeed. And it's finding the balance into this. You have many specific regulation in this different environments in the US. If you consider using AI for hiring processes, you have very specific obligation to demonstrate the strength of your bias management. So depending on what you do, there's constraint to develop or use or purchase AI that you need to consider. Organizations are more preoccupied about what do you need to do to succeed into AI, in doing AI. You've seen these metrics from MIT in August 2025. 95% of organization gets zero return on Gen AI investments. That's big. It almost sounds like that. No, that cannot be. Yes, it can. We're saying, if you're an organization that invested a million or a dozen of millions into AI or Gen AI investment, and you've got like 50 proof of concept, none of them in production, your return on this is definitely negative or zero. And we find so many organizations creating AI product, and these AI product are not pushed in production. And this, when we see this matrix, about 95% of organization not getting zero return on Gen AI investment, that's happening. So the question is, why is it happening? Is it because of the incapacity to align with compliance AI regulation? No, it's not that. That's part of the challenge. The main challenge is, well, the first one is, in many organizations, the development of AI product, AI system is technology driven. So we look at the cool technology, identify where it could, and we develop product that way instead of looking at business process, identify where automation can help. So what does it mean? It means it's a technology perspective trying to justify its usage to business perspective. And that's hard. That's hard because, again, if you want to have the full trust in a product that being built, an AI product being built, not only you need to demonstrate that you've considered all the laws and relation, but that's not the most important part. You need to demonstrate that your product will actually solve with KPIs and matrix, solve real business problem. That's hard to do if it's IT trying to push a solution. And that happens very, very often. The other perspective is there's so many facets that must be considered, privacy. We've done a PIA, privacy impact assessment. We know about some privacy risks, but have we consider all the consent perspective, the right to portability, the right to modify the data, or the right to accuracy? From the privacy perspective, how can you be reassured that you've done everything right? From the security perspective, the strength of the model, the guardrails around model gaming, and then from an ethic perspective, what are the possible impact? Have we put in place the right guardrail? So the thing is, you develop a technology. Very often from the technology perspective, it's good stuff. It's able to reproduce or make a decision in an efficient way. But if you fail to reassure all the different trust topic, you will not go to production. And this happens all the time. So compliance is one dimension. Being able to adequately consider all the relevant facets, that's a big challenge. And what happens is the fear of messing up. So you're in charge. You're the one who needs to sign off on the release on the AI project. Okay, you see that technology, very cool demo, and then you wonder about everything that can go wrong. Have I been reassured that it's okay? If you're not sure, you will not sign off. You'll say, well, I'm not sure that it's okay. And that happens everywhere. the fear of messing up, releasing something, and something you've not foreseen goes wrong. So how do you better equip your organization not only to understand and align with laws and regulation, but to orchestrate all these different facets required to succeed? That's one of the main focus of organization.
Yeah, that's so right. That's so scary. No. And where do you think the industry still need to improve?
That's a good question. I'm seeing the pace at which things are changing right now. And again, we said this in intro. I think you see governance as, let's put in place a structure, let's put in place things to govern, instead of the AI environment is going to change very fast. How can we be agile? How can we find the balance between safety and speed? So the organization needs to shift the mindset in terms of creating agile mechanism. We need to recognize that the pace of change, is greatly expanded from what existed before. So organizations themselves needs to focus on agility, focused on being lean and alignment mechanism between what you want to do, and make sure and build the capability to focus. This capability to focus, to connect governance mechanism, governance organization with exactly what you want to do. If you have this as a priority, organization will think of governance in terms of agility to govern. From a regulatory perspective, again, what I'm seeing is that there's a growing shift into understanding the need to put guardrail on high risk cases, for sure, but it becomes more and more, how do we enable organization to succeed? Because organization recognize that AI it's not just a competitive advantage now. It's a fundamental requirement to survive, and it's the ability of organization to. So as a country, if you recognize that fact, it becomes, how do you help your organization to adapt and be ready, in agile ways? So that focus is really a concern. The other aspect I would say is that I'm hearing a lot is about data and AI sovereignty. Regulatory environments are considering AI as, okay, we can buy here this external model, okay, and we want to create LLM based on this, but what's the risk of the foundational model being tampered with? Okay, and what are the right guide rails? And suddenly everything is about the idea that you need to put boundaries, you need to put your AI system isolated from the world. You need to ensure you have controls on all the parameters of your AI environment. And we're seeing this in many regulatory environment, the will to make sure the data, the model, the control perspective is under one single control environment. That being said, this mindset is greatly opposed or contradictory to the fact that in order for this to succeed, the interconnectivity between systems is fundamental. So you cannot develop and use this in silos. So how do you balance the need to have and manage sovereign AI and sovereignty on data with the need for interconnectivity? So there's a great challenge there. And these are the mechanism to do this. It needs to be thought of. And currently, some of the action done in the past year have been putting a regulatory environment in a silo that will be difficult to manage in the following years. So your question was about the challenges and what can be done better. Better think of the interconnectivity mechanism between AI, considering data and AI sovereignty, and how do we find the right balance in these areas.
Yeah, great. And if you had one piece of advice to companies building AI driven product today, what would it be?
It's a good question because you think of first and naturally recognizing the fact that AI is there, recognizing the criticality of the trust in the product that you built. And if you need to engage in a governance journey, the main parameter that drives everything is about accountability. Accountability is the main thing. So if you don't have all the guardrails, you have the small teams, you've got many elements and many components you need to orchestrate, and you're wondering where do you start and what's important. The main thing is, understand the high level risk, the high level understand that you might not have the resources to do it, and start with identifying accountabilities on different risks, accountabilities on different topics, accountabilities on different gates throughout the procurement or development of AI. And accountability is the key because even if you don't have all the pieces, the accountability is the part where someone needs to sign off. And even if the pieces are not there, the accountability is the best foundational lever to make sure things are aligned. So think of creating processes is a thing, but provide lack of agility. So how do you balance, structure and processes and gating and formal things with the need for agility? Accountability is often the solution to allow less formal control, more accountabilities on the review of the different components as heteroclite they might be. So that would be my suggestion. Definitely consider governance as a fundamental and critical element, and consider making sure the accountabilities on the governance is first defined, and then the process and the controls.
Taken. I love it. I love it. Mario, thank you for sharing your insights today. It was a great conversation, and I really enjoy hearing your perspective on governance, AI risk, the future of responsible AI, and accountability. Thank you so much for taking the time, Mario.
Thank you very much, Laurent.
And where can the audience find you or read about your work or get in touch with you?
Well, have you as you've heard in the past 30 minutes or 45 minutes, I'm really passionate about this. Please reach me on LinkedIn to engage in a conversation. Mario Cantin on LinkedIn from Prodago. Visit our website, or this is a place where we talk about this. My company Prodago is obsessed with this challenge of enabling success around AI and finding this balance. And we've developed many mechanisms and a platform to help our organization to do this. So it would be my pleasure to engage in discussion on that topic. So please reach me through the website or LinkedIn or my email, which is mario.cantin@prodago.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Thank you again, Mario.
Thank you, Laurent.
And that's it for today's episode of AI Interconnect. And if you enjoy it, share it with someone who is building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you. Have a good day.